inside the Borg and free from the hive mind, this is Rex Bear hosting Leap Project. The Leap Project was created to offer awareness and information not found in the mainstream news. With over 90% of the world's media controlled by only 6 enormous conglomerates, many people today are looking for more accurate information. The Leap Project offers a refreshing approach to the brain-drained media. Check back daily for new content as we thrive to bring you the cutting edge in news, current events, on-scene video footage, interviews, and most importantly, the truth. All right, tonight we have very special guest, James Gilliland. He is a minister, counselor, internationally known lecturer, best-selling author with the books Reunion with Source and Becoming Gods, as well as The Ultimate Soul Journey. James has appeared in Contact Has Begun, His Story, The History Channel, UFOs Then and Now, UFO Hotspots, ABC Fox News, BBC, Danny Dyer Special, Paranormal State, ECETI Ranch a Documentary, and the new movie Thrive have all featured James and ECETI, which he is the founder of. He has appeared on Coast to Coast, Jeff Rentz, and other numerous radio shows. Also, being the host of As You Wish Talk Radio, which is www.bbsradio.com, and Contact Has Begun, www.worldpuga.net. James is a facilitator of many Eastern disciplines, a visionary dedicated to the awakening and healing of humanity and the Earth, and he teaches higher dimensional realities from experience. James, glad you could make it out tonight. Where are you guys located?
Well, basically, we're located at the base of Mount Adams in Trout Lake, Washington, and it's an extremely well-known, it's internationally known UFO hotspot, and it has a long, long history of UFO activity going back to the Native Americans and, you know, the fire tower, the forest rangers. It's just been ongoing for so long, and we've had, I think, even Dr. John Hynek did research up here. David Long, I think Greg Long, David Akers, all those guys have written books about this place. So it just has a long, long history of UFO activity here.
So you've obviously made contact for quite some time. How long has there been a connection? How long have they actually made contact with you?
Well, I've had contact ever since I was a kid, and I didn't really understand the process. But you know, as I got older and did more research into it, I gained a lot more, you know, awareness on this level of what was going on. So I would say, you know, it's been going on for quite a long time. And I was actually raised in Apple Valley, California, which isn't too far away from the Integratron and all the contacts that were going on in that area as well. So it's been a part of my life ever since I was a little kid. We used to sleep out in the desert and throw out sleeping bags and, you know, watch UFOs. It was just a common thing.
So the UFOs that you've been seeing, have they actually been close enough to where you could see them from the, you know, with the naked eye without having a pair of binoculars or a telescope?
Oh yeah, they've come in really close. You know, we had Paranormal State out here, and you know, Danny Dyer, all these people doing UFO specials, and the ships came right when and where we said they would. They appeared and they flew treetop level, and then made a nice turn around the mountain. So it's been really well documented. And you know, from my own personal experience, I've had face-to-face contact with them and been on the ships.
Wow. So you've been on the ships. Well, the first time you were on a ship, James, what did it look like?
Well, the first time I went on a ship, it was a Pleiadian ship, and there wasn't much to it. They're very clean. They're very simple. It had 3 chairs in it for 3 people to fly in the one. It was a smaller one. And it had screens all the way around it, so you could see anywhere, you know, at any time, even their home world. If they wanted to, they could tune into that. But pretty amazing ship. But there's just, you know, there wasn't a lot of bells and whistles on it that you could see, because most of it was operated through the consciousness of the person. I mean, there's a few dials and things to flip if they wanted to, but most of it was almost like done with psychic switches, you might say, or something of that nature.
What kind of clothes were they wearing?
Well, they wore a kind of a spandex jumpsuit, very tight-fitting outfit. When I went on the ship, they actually had me put one on. And what's really interesting is the clothing. When you put it on, it actually felt better having the clothing on than not. It had an energetic component to it.
Was the clothing something that made it more accessible to communicate to the controls telepathically, or was it something that you felt they just had natural abilities to do?
I think it's natural, but the clothing also seemed to have kind of a life force to it.
You know, there's a lot of stuff now in the theaters about transhumanism, merging man with machine. The ship that you were on, that you're talking about, is it something like that?
Well, I think they're autonomous. The beings are autonomous, but at the same time they're connected. So they maintain their uniqueness, but at the same time they have a connected program going on. I think one of the problems with the transhuman agenda here is the people behind it, and it's not really for the betterment of humanity. It's for the control of humanity.
Right. It's technology can be used for you or against you, and it does appear that a lot of people now in power would definitely use something like that to their advantage and not the common folk.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting that you had that opportunity. The Pleiadians, do they look just like us?
Well, they seem to be more genetically refined. A lot of them live like 1,200 years, 900 years, and some even live longer than that. But they're more genetically refined, very beautiful, and they emanated an energy. When you're around them, you just felt this total blissful, loving presence.
Why is it that people portray the extraterrestrial race, or most of them, as a very evil species that wants to destroy humankind, not help them?
Well, mainly that's been an agenda for quite some time, because in order to keep the billions of dollars going into the war industry and the black projects, we have to have a threat. And so they really push that agenda, to keep people in fear and keep people saying, oh, you guys take care of this for us. We'll just keep throwing dollars your way. And but there are some ETs, a very small minority group that are regenerate. They aren't really in our highest and best good, but most of the universe is benevolent. But we need to rise to the occasion if we're going to be working with them.
Okay, so back to the experiences that you've had. This Pleiadian ship that you were on the first time. These Pleiadians, what did they tell you to do? What was your purpose there?
The first time I went with them, it was more of an indoctrination round. They just wanted me to know that they were real, to see the ship, and to be on the ship. And they flew it next to a fire tower. And there's some people up here. They let you rent the fire towers for a certain amount of time, and because they're not really using them anymore, a lot of them. And so there's an older man, and was a grandfather, grandmother, and their nephew or whatever were there. And so they flew this ship around the fire tower and just sat there and parked it. And I could see the occupants, and they're getting all excited and freaking out a little bit. And they sent them some energy to calm them down. And one of the kids took a crayon, and he was drawing the ship, the kid was. And then we left. And so a lot of this, your mind has trouble relating to this because it just doesn't seem real. Your mind's always trying to discount what happened. And so later on that week, it was a little while later, they went on, I'm trying to think of this. I think it's Joe Gorgiola or whatever, this show he has on. It's like Town Hall or something. But this couple actually went on Town Hall and talked about their experience, and it was the exact same experience that I saw, but I was on the ship when it happened.
How many people were on the ship?
There was just one other person on when I was on it. There was a female.
And did she tell you her age?
No, she didn't. It's hard to tell. There's one Pleiadian that we work with that's about 2 million years ahead of us in time as we know it, coming back in time, and she's about 430 years old, and she was the only one that's told me her age, and she looks about 25. I mean, she's just beautiful. But you can imagine if these beings live thousands of years, 430 years old would probably be not even adolescence for them.
Sure. And did you see any weapons?
No, I didn't, but I think they have the capability to defend themselves on those ships, but it's hidden. There's not like a big bazooka sitting there on the table. It's probably built into the ship somehow.
Were you frightened?
Not at all.
I mean, somebody going in a ship like that, especially at a young age, it's got to be quite fascinating. Was it just an overwhelming feeling of security, as if nothing was going to happen to you, basically?
Oh yeah, when you're in their presence, you feel totally protected and loved. You just, it's kind of an interesting experience. I can't even explain it, but they're very familiar. They activated some things within me that brought back a lot of my past life awareness of being on the ships in the past and things of that nature. So it was very second nature for me. It wasn't a problem at all.
So what is your purpose, James?
Well, good question. It's there's many levels to it. I wear many hats. I have kind of a science hat where I've been working with healing technologies and working a lot with water and this crystallized oxygen water and some other water technologies that are having amazing healing properties. But and there's other things I'm working with, but mainly I'm focused on the awakening and healing of humanity and the earth, and there's many hats to that. And a lot of it's more like an ambassador, a lot of it's educational, and kind of letting people know that these are ancient ancestors that are returning, and they're not really shouldn't be seen as some ET or something other than the greater family of man. They're part of our extended family.
Well, and you said you're working with somebody that's approximately 430 years old, and she's coming from the future 2 million years ahead of us. How are you making contact with her?
Well, with her, it's telepathic, mainly telepathic. I've seen her in my mind's eye. When she's talking to me, I'll close my eye and I can see her clairvoyantly. And then mainly that's that type of contact. There's different types of contact and different types of you might say connections on the ships and things, because some are more physical, some are taking you out of body in your etheric body, and it's just as physical on that level as it is on this level. They have some pretty extreme technology. So if you're going to go and hang out with a fifth dimensional being or a sixth or a seventh dimensional being, you have to have a body that resonates on that level. So we're multidimensional beings, and they can work with us through that multidimensional aspect of ourselves, so they can have these contacts.
And there's so many reasons to believe that there are the possibilities of higher dimensional beings, even if you haven't made contact with them like yourself, just because of all the looks like pretty good evidence out there, But let me ask you this. Why are humans in the middle of everything? It just seems as if we're pretty important, but are we?
Well, we have the seeds of the gods, basically. We have the genetics here that are just, a lot of them would like to have those genetics. It's amazing. But we're a big genetic soup down here. We're an experiment with 12 different star nations that were involved. I think others came later in terraforming the earth and bringing a lot of their genetics and their animal and plant life and things like that to the earth. So we're just this massive galactic zoo down here, and they're all kind of checking it out and watching over us.
An intergalactic ant farm.
Yeah, and we have no idea how valuable this planet is, and the genetic life here, and the resources and everything else here are just amazing. And we just trash them every day, including our own genetics. We're always trashing our own genetics and tinkering with them and poisoning ourselves. And it's not just us doing it. There's other elements that are involved doing that as well. So that's another story. When you get into the chemtrails and the vaccinations and all the other things going on, and the GMO foods and on and on and on.
Well, and that's something that I would like to address here in front of our listeners. And from a skeptical standpoint here, I'm going to play devil's advocate. With these Pleiadians having this technology and the ability to send energy beams down to people to calm them down and pick you up and move from time and space, etc., if we're so valuable and they care about us as much as you say they do, then why is it nuclear facilities are allowed to be put on fault lines and, Fukushima disasters? Why is it that they can put mercury in vaccines and force feed them into children and put chemicals into the skies and the water and the food supply? Is it another species? Is it human that's doing that? I mean, because it really does seem as if there's a nefarious ploy to cull the herd.
Yes, there is. There always has been. If you know the real history of Earth, basically, Earth has had advanced humans on here for 650 million years. And if you look at Cremo's work, Michael Cremo and some of the other people, everything points to that. And we're just, one of many civilizations that have had to start over due to pole shifts or meteor strikes or great wars or things of that nature. And they're just now finding out the remnants of great cities, like Vishnu's cities and cities named after, a lot of the different gods. And they're finding out that it's true. There's a layer of radioactive material there at that timeline, when they dig it up, where something big happened, a big nuclear war or something. So, they had their Vimanas, they had their flying ships and their weapons, and they had their and, the Anunnaki, they were always feuding among themselves, and they were having great wars, and they really made a mess of things. So a lot of if we really understand, there's different levels, because one, if you want to go into the dark level, at the top of the level, you have kind of some regenerate grays and reptilians and beings of that nature. There's some serpent-type beings that are on the highest level, the dark level, that are controlling the elite. They do rituals to these beings and take them on for power and wealth and things of that nature. And that explains why you have things like chemtrails and GMO foods and aspartame and fluoride in the water and everything else, because you don't have humans running the show. Humans don't do that. That's a very inhuman act. And that explains why things have gone so dark and so ugly. And a lot of us have allowed it and even willingly participated in that. So we're waking up now to what's really been going on the planet, and we're making a free will choice to rid ourselves of these influences and energies, and now the higher benevolent beings are actually stepping in to help us do that.
And let's talk about the reptilians and the grays for a moment. I've had the opportunity to speak with many people that have done research in ufology. Matter of fact, we talked to Kathleen Martin the other day, she works with MUFON. She's an international investigator for them. And the different races that are out there, the different grays, some of them that she talked about had different levels. But are all grays bad? Are all reptilians bad? Or is it just like anything else? You've got good and bad.
Well, you do. You have good and bad. There's kind of a joke, the grays are a real gray area, because some are just little worker bees. They're just little biological robots, and it depends on who's controlling them as to what's going on. So, some just might be gathering data here and gathering samples and checking out the radiation levels on the Earth and how much we've polluted the Earth and how it's affecting, our genetics and our reproduction program. And they have others that have a more sinister agenda, and there's some that are dying. They're a dying race, and they've been cloning themselves, and they actually cloned emotions out of their race, and they're dying because emotions is the life force. It's what keeps the body together. So they have massive heads because all they seek is knowledge. And so they have these huge heads, but their bodies are atrophying. They have very spindly bodies. And so they made a serious mistake. So they're actually creating hybrids and getting genetics, in agreement. They've made agreements with certain factions of our government to do this. And so there's so many different things going on with the grays that it's hard you can't really pigeonhole or make a blanket statement about them.
Now, is that why people are abducted and claim to have mass experiments done on their bodies, particular fluids taken, etc.?
Yes. Yeah, that's that process. And there's some that are just experimenting, that don't really give a rat's ass about us, basically. So, but, luckily the benevolence have stepped in on that. You'll hear that a lot of that went on for a while has stopped, and because the higher dimensional beings and the benevolence, the very spiritually and technologically advanced beings have stepped in and said, okay, enough of that.
Well, what level is the human archetype at right now, the overall? Are we third dimension?
Well, we're kind of third going into the fourth. We're going through a huge shift, in vibration or frequency. And so we're moving up right now. We're in that process. And in that process, the veils are going to come down, and we're going to start seeing a lot of these other beings that have been, messing with us, some good, some not so good. So we're in the process right now of the veils coming down. And, people are starting to see, they're seeing the shadow people. They're seeing beings standing right next to them. They're seeing light beings. They're seeing all kinds of things happening right now. And a lot of people are seeing it on their peripheral vision, because the cones in your eyes are set up to see the higher dimensions through your peripheral vision. So if you can train yourself not to turn and look straight at it and keep looking off to the side, you can hold on to these images longer and see some of these beings that are zipping around us that have been there all along. We just weren't aware of it.
Well, and I've read a lot of reports in my research that abductees, contactees, tend to have shadow people follow them around.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You know, Men in Black and everything. We've had that here. My nephew had a visit by some Men in Black, which was pretty interesting. But they actually had painted on eyebrows and lips and things. You know. And
wow, tell us about that.
Well, it got really hot. It was very hot, and he started calling the higher dimensional beings because he wasn't sure about these guys, and they were asking questions about ECETI and me and things like that. And all of a sudden, they started sweating, you know, profusely. And then one of the guys wiped his head, you know, and his eyebrow came off, and the other guy looked at him and said, "Okay, this is over," and they got up and left.
Were they wearing the typical Men in Black clothing?
Yeah, all black, no hair. And they had some weird badge, you know, with an eagle on it and something else, but they actually have some kind of a major security badge or something that they carry around.
So, who do you think the Men in Black are? Are they human?
You know, they do have some pretty extreme technology because they stepped out the door and just disappeared. And he was on a stairway that had a couple back and forth things before you get to the bottom. That they never took the stairs. They stepped out and he opened back the door and he's going to ask him another question. And he was just going to straight up say, "Well, who are you guys really? I really want to see your badge again. I want to see your who you're associated with or whatever." And they were gone. Mm. So yeah, they have some very advanced technology. I don't know if they're part of the Black projects or some type of an ET, you know, but they're very advanced in some of their abilities.
Well, and if we could go back to some of your contacts that you've had, how many times would you say you've been picked up and actually physically been on a craft?
Physically only once, but the out-of-body things that went on after that were just phenomenal. One instance I was on with the Orion Council of Light. I was on one of their ships. It's a plasma ship, and it's not really physical. And when it came over the ranch here, it kind of drained everybody's batteries. And it shook the houses, and there's a woman in an RV. She was freaked out because it really shook her RV and then drained all the batteries when it flew over. But they sent a beam right through the wall that hit me in the chest and pulled me right up on the ship and pulled me out of body to have a conversation with them.
When you had this out-of-body experience, what was the conversation like?
It was very short. What happened was I was in the bathtub, actually, and I was meditating, and I said, I want to know what my part in all of this is. You know, why are these ships keep, you know, flying around? And you know, I really want to know what my part in all this is, because there was so much going on. It was getting pretty confusing. And so this ship appeared, and it sent a beam through the wall and hit me in the chest, and it sent 3 gold balls of energy down the beam. And all 3 of them hit me in the chest, and then the next thing you know, I was pulled out of body and I was on the ship, and I was talking to a being by the name of Malia, and she had it almost looked like a swimming suit cap on, and 2 gold bars suspended above her head. And I asked her what the gold bars were above her head, and she said it was a spiritual technology they used to initiate people. And then I asked her what the 3 gold balls that hit me in the chest were, and she said, all your memories have been returned. And so those were all my past lives, you know, off-world and here as well. And so those were returned to me. And people don't realize we think we're just a body and a personality, but we're really an eternal soul that's been all over the galaxy. But that information, we have to access that. We have to do spiritual practices to access that information. And once we do, this all makes sense.
Now, when you were on this plasma-like ship, was that the only being there that you were talking to at the moment, or was there like a council?
No, that was all I saw. All I saw was this one being, and I was just focused on her, and she told me I needed to go back because I couldn't stay there because the energy was so strong that I'd have a hard time adjusting back to the Earth frequency. And one of the problems with these beings when you're around them and when you're in that energy and then you have to come back to Earth and deal with these energies, it's rough. It's really rough to assimilate them because, you know, there's not a lot of love on this planet and not a lot of impeccable integrity and things of that nature. It's far and few between. So when you're in that energy and you're feeling that vibration and then you come back here, it's kind of rough on you.
Right. And also when you got back and you woke back, you know, snapped out of the out-of-body experience that you had, did you remember your past lives? Do you remember them now? Could you just, bang, I was, you know, 500 years ago, this is who I was, 2,000 years ago. Can you remember the different galaxies that you've been in?
Well, what's interesting is one thing I wanted to cover first was that they left a red mark in the middle of my chest where the beam hit me, and Joe Burks with ECETI was there, and he actually checked it out, and he said, yeah, he goes, that's amazing. And he says, that looks like a radiation burn, is it painful? And I said, no, not at all, nothing, I don't feel anything. And it morphed. It was kind of strange because it started out like a circle and it morphed into a triangle and then like a heart-shaped object, and then a gold film kind of resonated over it, and it just left. It went away. So that was some of the physical proof, of the event. And I told him I wanted physical proof that this is a real event, that this isn't a dream or, or overactive imagination. And so that was the proof that I got on that one. But I started having flashes of past lives where I was almost like watching a movie, and sometimes it was just maybe 10 seconds or 12 seconds or something like that. And I would get the whole emotional feeling of that lifetime of who I was and how I felt, and it's quite interesting. But I started viewing them that way, and some I stayed with longer. And, I found out I've done everything here. I've been, a cripple. I was a Viking warrior. I hacked off heads. I was a road bandit in Mexico. But I also had a lot of lives as lamas and yogis and spiritual people of that nature. And I did a lot of work, in the Orion system, in the Pleiades and other systems as well. And it brought back memories of flying ships and things of that nature, and even flying by the Earth before it was solid, before it was even formed.
Well, and did they give you the information on how they put the Earth together and how they created human?
Well, basically, it's interesting because the Earth was part of a system that, was evolving naturally. There is a natural creative flow of things, and the Earth was evolving naturally, and it was in the cradle orbit, and they brought in, there used to be two moons. There's one moon, then two moons, and then no moon, and then one moon again. So in our ancient history, so they've done a lot of work. The moons really aren't what we think they are. They were terraforming bases, is what they operated from to do terraforming. There's a lot more to that story. That our moon was taken over, and now it's been retaken back again. So it's there's so many things that are going on right now. It's hard to stay focused on just one event because there's so many different levels of things happening. You almost have to have a multi-dimensional mind to even cover all of it.
Very interesting. But so you say that it was taken over and then taken over again by another race, and then obviously there's been these recent news articles the past few years of us sending missiles to the moon for some ridiculous reasons. So who is controlling it now?
The benevolents have it now. They've taken it back, and they're cleaning up the mess and recalibrating things. And the moon was suppressing us in many ways. There's energies coming from the moon that were very suppressive, and so that's been changed.
Who are our helpers and who are our enemies?
Well, you've got the regenerate. Yeah, you have the regenerate ETs. Some of the reptilian grays, and there's some other totally non-physical, like serpent-type beings that are really nasty. And those three, and there's a couple other little side ones that are, there's some just sitting on the fence, that are opportunists out there as well. But those are the ones that we need to pay attention to and keep an eye on, and actually reclaim our planet, back from these beings. And they're the ones that have, taken over through the elite, you might say.
Through the elite. So have the bloodlines that go back to the pharaohs, pre-pharaohs, are those the ones that have pretty much controlled the world? And are you referring to a race above them that controls them through their particular DNA? Yes.
There's their physical puppets, you might say. And if you are of the bloodline and you agree to it, you'll get immense power and wealth, and you have all these opportunities by joining them, but you also get possessed.
Now, when you talk about the Archons, many people haven't heard of the Archons, but if maybe we could get into that, because I think it's very important. Talked about the Nag Hammadi treaties, etc. Are the Archons a actual physical force, or are they a entity that has to work through machine?
Well, there's different levels of like everything. There's some that have totally taken up physical bodies here. They're operating in the physical. And there's some that are more in the unseen, dimensions working. So there's many different levels, and they have their technology, which is very controlling and manipulating. And unfortunately, most of our technology has gone in that direction as well. So you kind of know who's in charge of that. But they take our finest minds and have them build weapons, when they could be cleaning up the planet and giving us alternative energy resources.
When's that going to change?
Well, it's in the process of changing right now because the Archon network and that grid is falling apart. And they're doing some incredible work on an energy level and a consciousness and energy level or spiritual level where they're collapsing this old grid. And so they're working at the level of cause and other subtle levels of changing everything. And there is, some face-to-face things going on, too, where they're actually eliminating a lot of these aspects that are seriously damaging, the evolution of Earth and the Earth itself.
So when you learn about these different dimensional beings, the 5th level, the 6th level, etc., how high up the chain does it go?
Well, it goes back to the source, basically. So, in some of my little excursions, you might say out of body, I met up with some light beings, and they took me all the way to the void. And they said there's even dimensions beyond that. So I haven't gone past the void, but I've seen the void. And I actually saw the first level of creation where the polarities begin. And then after that, there's these incredible light beings that exist. They have magnetized light bodies and live in a more of a holographic light universe.
Well, and could you get into some of that with us? That sounds fascinating.
Well, I don't know too much about it other than what I've observed is that they're just of an extremely high frequency and their lives, they want for nothing. Everything is more built on consciousness and light, and all they have to do is think about what they want, and they can create it.
Well, what was the void like?
There's nothing happening there. It's very boring. I thought about that. When I went to the void and I was sitting in the void for a while, I said, now I understand creation, why the Creator created, because this is boring. I mean, there's nothing going on here. But it is a place where all potentials exist, and you can create from that space, but you wouldn't want to live there or hang out there. And, you want to experience creation. You want to walk among creation. You want to really enjoy what you created, which is why they created bodies, so they could come down here and walk among their own creations.
And when you went to the creation part after the void, was it like a empty canvas, basically, where you could just create whatever you wanted by a mind?
Well, the void, what happened is right before I went into the void, there were 2 pillars. There was 2 giant pillars, and one pillar was full of like black orbs, and the other pillar was full of white orbs. But when you looked at them, they would change in their nature. If you looked at the black orbs, they'd turn light. If you looked at the white orbs, they would turn dark. It was really interesting. So I was saying that our thought process has a direct relation to these fields of energy. And so that was the polarities, where polarity began. And then from there, the rest of creation seems to pour forth from.
Incredible. When you came back, was it almost like boring for you? You wanted to get back out there and do it again?
Well, I had a whole different perspective when I came back. One of the problems I was having was holding form together, and form kept changing from a physical matter to more like a golden energy, or, it looked like it was shape-shifting back and forth. And so that really messes your psyche up because, you think everything's physical here, and you really depend on the earth to be solid, to keep you safe maybe. And when you start seeing that, you start realizing that everything is just condensed consciousness, basically, that goes from consciousness to light to energy and then mass, which our physicists have finally figured out. They've taken it to light, but they don't really realize consciousness is behind the light. That's the final journey. But it's cause, it's the cause of everything else. But it's quite interesting when you understand that. It just gives Earth a whole new meaning. But you become an alien when you're down here because you're aware of all this stuff and you're watching all the dramas and all the forgotten gods walking around not even knowing who they are.
And another thing, too, with the fact, at least science says that about, 80% of our DNA is inactive approximately?
Yeah.
So is our DNA somewhat of a storage block, like a hard drive for information that can be used to do great things?
Well, exactly. Your DNA, it's not, they call it junk DNA. It's not junk. It's just inactive, and it's being activated through various means. And we're moving into a whole new, different place in the universe right now, a highly energized place and in alignment with galactic plane and the sun as well. And all of that is activating our DNA, and it's creating incredible changes on the planet. Even carbon is changing right now due to a lot of the energies coming from the sun. So we're going through a huge shift and a huge change. Now we can actually participate in that change because they've done research on, master teachers like lamas and yogis, and they found out that they went through DNA changes just due to their spiritual practices. So we're also going through just an immense interdimensional play, you might say, that's going on where other beings are assisting us in this process. So there's so many different things going on, but what's very important is that we participate in this, that we activate it, that we do our part in this shift, or we're going to be left behind, basically.
And what is our part?
Well, we need to start operating under universal law, and people don't really understand what that is, but it's very simple. It's basically universal peace, brother, sisterly love, and individual freedom and prosperity for everybody. It's unity consciousness, and we need to start shifting and finding that impeccable integrity within us to start working, within universal law and release the past and let go of the old paradigm and not participate in the wars and the greed and the deceptions and all the other things that are rampant on the planet right now.
Now, you put together seminars, and I know you've been studying different Eastern philosophies for a lot of years. Maybe you could tell our listeners what something like that would consist of. Does that allow an individual to open up certain parts of their mind where they might be able to have an out-of-body experience or to use their sixth sense?
Yeah, exactly. What we do is that we create a field, and in that field, when people are in that field, we're also giving a lot of information out about who we really are, our interdimensional nature, like who's who in the universe, how to access that, how to get past being just a body and a personality and thinking that's all there is. And there's some science involved in that, and a lot of information that creates a mental construct or a pathway for people to open up and experience the higher dimensionality of self, you might say. So that's basically what happens. And during the workshops, people actually engage these higher dimensional beings and experience them firsthand. It's not just somebody telling you something or doing a psychic reading or something like that. It's actually you're having the experience within yourself.
And a lot of people that have heard about astral projection or out-of-body experience don't know the difference between the two. They think they're one and of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you have an out-of-body experience at will, or is it something that just happens once in a while when your body falls asleep and your mind's still awake?
Kind of both. But, I can guide them sometimes. I can put the intent out, this is what I want to experience when I go to sleep at night, and then I'll go there. Actually, see, everybody's having out-of-body experiences. When you're sleeping, you're out of your body. You're actually hovering just above your body. And so that's kind of natural. Where you go is a lot of that's determined on your spiritual adeptness, you might say, and the ability to remember as well what happened, because there's a veil between that world and this world, and not much gets through that veil unless you've learned how to thin that veil and recover information from the higher dimensions.
And also, you've talked earlier about how there's higher dimensional entities and lower dimensional entities. It seems as if, at least on this plane of existence, for every action, there is an opposite and equal reaction. Mm-hmm. So it's as if there's an opposite to everything. Does that mean that in these realms that we're in, for every higher dimensional entity and the 10th level, there's going to be one that is opposite to that, the anti, which is just as negative on the opposite scale?
No, it doesn't really work that way, because and this is going to upset a lot of people, because everybody's talking about these seventh dimensional dragon beings that eat people, and human peel off and things like that. It doesn't work that way, because when you get past the fifth or into the fifth dimension, you're in unity consciousness. And when you're in unity consciousness, you behave according to universal law. So, you can't really get past the fifth dimension without, being kind to each other and being kind to all life and seeing the creator in all creation. You're not of that consciousness. So, but within the fourth is a vast dimension, and there's all kinds of levels in the fourth dimension. So you have, on the lowest level of the fourth dimension, you have a lot of the things that people talk about, like demonics and regeneratives and things of that on the lower levels. In the mid-levels of the fourth dimension, you have a lot of everyday people that are on the wheel. You know, they're going to reincarnate and come back, and they're kind of stuck on the wheel. And in the higher dimensions on the fourth dimension, you have a lot of masters and teachers and people of a very high level of consciousness, but they're still stuck on the wheel because they have some kind of religious belief or cultural belief that creates separation, so they haven't gotten off the wheel yet. And then when you get off the wheel, you're into unity consciousness, and that's the fifth dimension. And then there you're, you know, everybody's arm in arm, they're all working together, and, you know, they don't run around warring on each other or eating each other or anything of that nature. It just doesn't exist.
You know, it's interesting, too, because it's almost as if this particular dimension we're in, everything is somewhat parasitic to survive. Even if you're a vegan, you're still eating grains, you know, fruits, vegetables, etc. You're still eating mass material. So it's as if you have to take something of substance to survive. I've heard the stories of people being able to live off of light, but I haven't really seen any proof of that yet. So it's interesting. It's definitely, there's a polarity here. So hearing that at these higher levels, you get out of that into a sense of unity and harmony, I find that fantastic. So let me ask you this. In the fourth dimension, if you get reincarnated into the fourth dimension and then the fifth dimension, let's say, are you walking around and, you know, floating around in a light body, giving people high fives and somewhat of a jetpack without a jetpack, just being able to think where you want to go in the universe, and bang, you're flying past the Milky Way? What's it like?
Well, on that dimension, when you have a fifth dimensional body, everything is physical to you because your body is resonating at that frequency. But it's a much more unlimited reality. You have more control over time and space and distance, all those things. You know, you can appear wherever you want to be and do whatever you want to do and create whatever you want to experience. A lot of masters incarnated from the fifth dimension, and on that level, let's say if your dream was to create a great, you know, a beautiful lake, you know, with a beautiful cabin on it, and have your Jeep and your fishing poles and catch a great fish and all that stuff, you could create that whole scenario and do it. And you would realize it was just all energy coming together, that there really wasn't any death or anything else in that process. So that's that kind of experience you can have on the fifth dimension. A lot of people, when they cross over, if they make it into the fifth dimension, they'll act out some of their dreams, the things that brought them joy, and take a break, you know, there for a while.
You know, another thing, too, that's interesting with technology these days, James, is it's as if some of these supercomputers that can calculate 40,000 quadrillion floating points per second, literally enough to calculate multiple scenarios in you know, just fractions of seconds. With the right technology in the wrong hands, it's something that could cause enslavement and a supercomputer that might create its own consciousness, possibly. You've seen these science fiction movies. Have you ever made contact or heard about contact with some type of Cylon, you know, literally artificial intelligence that turned into somewhat of its own intelligence, basically?
You know, some of the grades are like that. Actually, you know, they lack emotions, and they're actually, the ship can't fly without them. They are the system, you know, of the ship. So that's kind of, because when you get really advanced, you go into biotechnology. You go into the computers or bio. You know, they're not using silicon or anything else. They're more of a biocomputer. But yeah, you know, they exist out there. Those type of beings are out there, and that's one of the things that we need to be very careful of, because I tell you what, if you really listen to a lot of people in the field of spirituality and ufology, when you hear them talking about transhumanism or global depopulation or things like that, big red flag, you know. And if you look at who they're, you know, hobnobbing with, you know, they're talking about, you know, some of the, you know, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, things like that. And they're going, oh, yeah, I met with them and I met with this and everything else, you know, big red flag right there. And also, too, you know, when they have backgrounds in military intelligence and things like that, which the UFO field is just riddled with, you know, you have to be careful on what's going on there, because a lot of the information is being steered and contained, you know, and they have planned opposition, people in the highest levels in places that are making sure the information stays within a certain box and that it doesn't go forward. And I'll tell you what the box is. The box is that, you know, they're always getting people looking in the past, like Roswell and things like that. They want to keep you focused on the past, or they're going to tell you there's going to be some future contact happening, and they're the ones that are going to do it. But the problem with that is that contact is happening now. It's always been happening, and it's happened since the beginning of human history. And the people that have risen to the occasion have been having contact for a long time, as well as people that fell are having contact with the negative ones. So contact has been going on for quite some time, but we need to be aware of what's happening on these other levels, to really understand what's going on.
Sure. And when you get into some of these negative entities, have you ever actually been threatened by one of them? Has there ever been one that's actually came into your dream or your thoughts and said, hey, look, if you keep talking about this, you're done?
Pretty constant, basically. It's an ongoing battle here in consciousness happening, and when I've been highly trained in that and how to deal with unseen negative influences, and I have a lot of friends on high that step in to help in that process. So it's an ongoing thing that's happening, and you always have to keep an eye on what's happening. And a lot of people will fall, they'll crack the door or make an agreement or something, and they let them in. There's some great work out there right now. There's a guy named, I think it's Richard Stevens, that just did an interview. He'd be a great one, but he talks about the Aboriginal ways and how they see these parasites and these these dimensional beings, these 4D beings that are hooking into people, and they're predators and parasites, and how they like to manipulate and control it. And there's a lot of people. I think it's John Lash. I think there's all
John Lash is very knowledgeable on the Archons.
Yeah, all these people are coming out with this information now. I wrote about it in 1982 about the Archon network, who they were, and everything. And I'm really glad that other people are bringing that out. It's funny, but a lot of people are saying, "Oh, this is brand new, and we got to learn about this." And I go, "This has been going on forever, and it's quite a mess out there. So we need to." I notice my Skype is acting up right now just by talking about it. So
it happens a lot, James, especially when you start talking about the Archons.
Exactly. Yeah, they have control of the technology, so we have to do a little prayer on the network here and keep it open.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too. From my research, I had the opportunity to read the Nag Hammadi treaties, and the Secret Book of John talks a lot about the Archons and how they were created and tried to manipulate him when they found out that he was actually greater than they were because of the inner source, basically, is what it comes down to. I want to make a long story short. But where has your research led you into, or the people that you've talked to, these other interdimensional entities, these Pleiadians, did the Archons actually create man?
No, they didn't, and they're trying to claim they did, and they're trying, but they didn't. Basically, our roots go back to a very divine source. So it's basically the planet has been colonized many, many times by different star nations. That's why there's such a diverse genetic soup down here, and those beings were actually created by a creator, a source, whatever you want to call it. And there's multi dimensions to that. So there are the gods, the little g, and there are the demigods, which are half human, half god, half god, little g god, and the gods of old. We have this image of the bearded god, with blue eyes or green eyes, usually light-haired, either red or blonde. Those are coming from the Anunnaki. The ancient ones are very tall, and that's where we got that image from. And they interbred. And there's a story that people don't understand, but what happened was when the Anunnaki came here, they were under universal law, and they had strict laws about interfering with other civilizations, but they also had their home planet to protect at the same time. So they actually gave us a huge genetic uplink. Some people here on the Earth, there was a Neanderthal knuckle dragger that was here that was already pretty wise. It wasn't that, they buried their dead. They did ceremonies. They threw flowers on the graves, things like that. They weren't that barbaric, but they actually genetically uplinked them for help, so they could mine the gold to do an aerosol program, and they also ingested the gold to keep their civilization alive and going. And so it was a huge jump in genetics and evolution, along with getting their needs met to survive and keep their place going. And that's one story. There's many, many stories that have panned out on the Earth. But when they left some people in charge, and 200 to 300 people in charge, and that's where we get the story of the fallen ones, where they saw the women of man to be fair and started taking them as wives, and they created the demigods, which are half man and half woman. And half god, half man, But this history goes all throughout the Greek, mythology about the gods, the Egyptian gods, the Nordic gods, all of these gods were actually the Anunnaki, that the ancient ones, and they kept moving around because they kept feuding and having great wars, and the main feud was between Enki and Enlil, and Enki was the all-loving creator god that wanted to see humanity go forward and excel and evolve to the highest potential, and was actually genetically adding more and more genes and activating more and more genes. And Enlil wanted humanity to be gone. He said, this is a bad experiment. We got what we need. Let's end it and let's clear them out. And so that's where we got our ancient, creation stories and things like that from, where, we have two gods. We have the Old Testament God, which is just jealous and wrathful and genocidal, basically. It's a real mess. And then you get in the New Testament where Jesus pops in, he talks about an all-loving, all-forgiving God, and that's where these images came from. And then we have to go back, well, who created these guys? There's some kind of an intelligence that's a force and a frequency beyond these physical appearances that created these beings, and that's where I go to.
So it's interesting because a lot of people have tried to grasp time, and it's as if time is irrelevant, especially in some of these higher dimensions. So is there one God? One ultimate God?
Well, I think there's, like, whatever you want to call it, a supreme prime director, prime creative force. I would imagine there probably is, but when we say one, if you think about a hologram, you could have many, but they're all one. It's hard for us to understand about being unique yet one at the same time. When I had my near-death experience, I went through all these levels and planes, and I ended up in this golden plane of bliss. And I was a light being. I had a light body, and I was unique. I was still aware of myself and my own consciousness, but I was also surrounded by a greater consciousness that I was a part of. So I was unique, but I was one at the same time. And when you understand that concept, that you can have two at the same time, it makes sense, because we're all just focal points in a unified field, this massive interdimensional field. We're all just holding a frequency point on that field, and as I said before, we can hold a really small point, a very unexpanded point in the field, as just being a personality in a body, or we can expand that field and take in more of that the field and realize that we're a multidimensional being, existing on a vibrational continuum.
A drop of water within the ocean.
Exactly.
And also, it sounds to me like you've had the opportunity to read The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, or at least you think along the same lines of his theory.
No, I haven't. I haven't read that, actually.
Wow, okay. Excellent. Well, what you're saying is very similar to what he talks about this holographic reality somewhat that we live in. And that brings me to the next question that I wanted to ask you, James. Do you believe that everything has some type of consciousness?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think the creator is in all creation, and if you talk to any Native American elder or any other elders or any of the indigenous people, they all pretty much believe the same way.
And these different entities, these higher dimensional beings, what do they think like? What is it that their consciousness brings?
Well, basically, from that level of consciousness, and I know there's no way I can capsulize, their consciousness. I can kind of give a overview of it, but it's like they see the creator in all creation, and they're one with that. And they also see that we're eternal beings, and that we go on, and however long it's going to take to figure things out, we have that time. We might not have that time on this level, on the physical level, because our physical bodies have we're on a timeline, and we have so much time to do what we need to do. But in the bigger picture, they see things differently, and that's why they kind of allow us to have all these experiences down here, which may seem very traumatic and painful on this level, but we gain wisdom through these experiences, and we're evolving, and eventually they know we're going to evolve out of that.
And when we evolve out of it, some people speculate that the earth has its own spirit, the sun has its own spiritual entity, etc. Is that the next level? Is that a different dimension, like the sixth or seventh? And do you believe that the earth has its own spirit?
Oh, definitely. The earth is alive, and she has her own spirit, and we're killing it. We're killing her right now. All the things we're doing to the planet, with Fukushima, with fracking, all the pollution and the nukes that we've been blowing off, and we're still doing them. All those things are having very serious results, with the planet. And this is our platform for life, and we're destroying it, which makes no sense. And we have these people that are so unconscious. What good is your Porsche, or your Mercedes going to be, or your yacht, when the oceans are poisonous and there's no roads and there's no food? When the platform for life ceases, what's the point? But people have become so materialistic. They've gotten so detached from the world and nature that they're just moving towards their own demise. They're creating their own demise.
It reminds me of that song Trent Reznor wrote several years ago. You can have it all. You can have my empires of dirt. And then Johnny Cash sang that song. People are building these giant empires of dirt is basically what it comes down to. Once you pass this materialistic realm. So very interesting, James.
I'm having some crazy stuff going on with my internet right now. I just got a black screen with some writing on it, and it says "looking good," and then it went back to the internet. So went back to Skype. So that's somebody's playing around there. They must like what we're doing.
Wow, that's extremely odd. Yeah, it's interesting. We have a YouTube channel, and our YouTube channel got taken down without a reason.
Oh, exactly. That's been going on for quite some time. Since I've been in this field, I've experienced just about everything, from having lug nuts taken off my car, brake lines cut. I've been shot at a couple times, and black helicopters hit me with pulse weapons. You name it. We've experienced just about everything, and but they always seem to be putting me back together. Lately I got really hammered hard by. I was actually interviewing Dr. Dream and Laura Eisenhower on my show, and a black helicopter flew right over me and hit me with this pulse weapon and just scattered everything. It was amazing. And you can hear it on the interview, But I don't know. I'm still here, and they keep putting me back together, so I'm just going to keep going forward.
How often do you see black helicopters?
A lot. We were seeing them a lot here, but they've now they're very covert, and they fly very low and very fast, and they're on you and gone, But before, they used to always fly around the area and monitor, and we've been filming them and putting them up on YouTube and things like that. So now they're being a lot more clandestine in their work.
It's interesting, too. I have heard of other people that are contactees that get targeted with those energy weapons that make their head hurt, that ringing in their ear. So do you have some type of Faraday cage in your house to help protect you from that kind of stuff?
Kind of, yeah. I have some things that I'm doing, but they're still not fully taking care of the problem because of the technologies that they have. But there's spiritual defenses, and then there's alignments with the higher dimensional beings that help out most of all. And, I actually saw a black helicopter coming straight at the ranch here, and all of a sudden it stopped and then started going backwards. And then I saw a ship appear between us. So there's been some major intervention. I'd love to hear the pilots talk or see the look on their face when all of a sudden they're flying backwards,
So you think that it was actually a ship that caused them to fly backwards? You don't think they were showing off some new technology they had on their helicopter?
No, I actually filmed it. I was filming it, and then you could see this ship appear, and it was kind of a triangular. It looked more like a pyramid, but both sides, of a pyramid, like a diamond-shaped ship, and you could actually see it, on the footage.
Jeez. Now, do you see a lot of the triangle ships out on your ranch?
We see all kinds of ships on the ranch. Like it's really very. We've seen giant pyramid type ships. I saw 3 of them that were like probably 3 times bigger than a big airliner. We see giant cylinders. We see some mile-long triangle ships have flown over here. We've actually filmed them, and we've got ships like every color, like pink, green, blue, everything you can imagine, almost every color you can imagine.
Have you ever had the opportunity to see the pilots?
Yeah, I have. Actually, what's interesting is that when you develop yourself, you can actually communicate with them. And you can actually sense who's on the ship or which group. And then you start to learn the ships. The more you see them, the more you can say, oh, that's, those guys from Sirius. Those are big golden ships. Or those guys are Pleiadians. Those are the blue, white ships or whatever. And, you can feel the energy, and my body actually gives me signals as to which group is there. I can feel them within my body, and I can also feel their presence. What's interesting, when they're here, you can feel them, and the birds start singing, the coyotes start going off, and everything else. So it's kind of a interesting ongoing situation here, and it's, you know, what's interesting, it hasn't stopped. It's still going on. So it's not something that, you know, people say, well, prove this exists. I always say, well, come out and get your own proof. You know, bring your camera.
Do you need a special type of camera, or can you just bring anything?
Well, we have some toys that we use that work really well, but a lot of the digital cameras will pick up the ships where your eyes can't see them, because your eyes can only see a certain amount of the visible light spectrum, but the cameras can see more. And people just take shots of the mountain, and they look and they go, oh my God, there's a big cigar-shaped ship there, or there's a saucer or whatever. So people get shots of the ships all the time. But we also have third generation military night vision that we use, and I hook that into a Sony camera to where I can actually film the ships when they come over, and you can see 3 times more at least of the stars and the movement when you have those third generation night visions. But you know, the visible, when you go to Heavens Above or J-Tracker or whatever else, you know, you could look on these sites and they'll tell you what's flying over your area, and they'll tell you the visible satellites that you can see with the naked eye. And so when you see some guy on YouTube tried to debunk us, it was really interesting, but they'll say, you know, there's maybe 1 to 4 visible satellites that are going to be flying over our area, and the rest are not. You know, they're not visible because they're either in the Earth's shadow or some other reason. They're just not bright enough. And some guy tried to debunk and says, yeah, well, I saw 70 to 85 objects fly over the ranch, but they were all satellites. And he said that not one of them was a UFO, and some flew really low, like treetop level and things like that. And I'm going, my God, there's no way there's 70 to 85 satellites flying over our area that are visible, and they're not flying low, and they're not flashing back at you. And it was unbelievable. You know, the guy go, well, that proves clearly that there are no UFOs there. I just went, oh my God, you just proved there are, you know. But it's pretty amazing.
Now, do you think that there's a possible base underneath Mount Adams?
Well, if you go by the Native American lore, they say there is a base underneath the mountain, and there are some very benevolent ETs living there, and they used to take their wounded or their sick up to the mountain, and there's a door, and they would open it up, and they would come out and pick them up and take them inside, and then they would get a message to come back and get them, and you know, in a very short amount of time, these people would be healed of like broken bones or very serious illnesses and things of that nature. So that history is very well documented. Even people have written some books about it. But they said they had to close the door and stop all interaction because we were getting far too aggressive on the surface, and our technologies were going in the wrong direction. So they actually had to break off contact.
You know, and you were talking about the Pleiadians earlier, and how some of their lifespans could be over 1,000 years. I wonder, if they have that type of technology to live that long, why couldn't they just live indefinitely and regenerate their DNA?
Well, I think some of them do, actually. Some of them do have that ability. You know, the ancient ones, the Anunnaki, some of them had eternal life. There's an old story about Noah, who was one of Enki's son, who was a demigod. Actually, he was half human, half Anunnaki, and Enlil was very upset with Noah because Noah had reached that eternal life status, and he was half human, you know. So he said, wait a second, that doesn't work, you know. How and so Enki was always saving Noah and his offspring and giving them a heads up about things going on and floods and things of that nature. So you know, they came out with a new movie, Noah, and I wish they would have told the real story, but they didn't. Again, you know, they kept to the old program, but you know, that's the real history behind that. You know, the story about the Anunnaki, if people understand it, they still exist, and they're a very benevolent race of beings. They have a council of 12, and there's 6 women, 6 men on that council, and they're very, very advanced beings, very spiritually and technologically advanced beings, and they're actually returning to deal with the fallen Anunnaki. And some of those Anunnaki are well-known names. You know, Marduk was one of them. Marduk is even on the dinar, I believe, or on the bills. The sons of Marduk was the Bush family and those groups, Illuminati groups. And Marduk was one of the fallen ones who actually joined with the Reptilians and the Greys to kick out the other Anunnaki, so he'd have supreme rulership over the earth. And that didn't work out too good, because they ended up taking over and kicked him out. So, he's still floating around there in the astral level. He's pretty much locked down by his karma. But there's a grave site there. I think Alexander the Great found his grave and actually restored it. But, those stories, if we really understand our ancient history, we understand why we're in this mess and how these alignments were made with these other regenerate beings. And they've just played havoc on our civilization, psychically and on an evolutionary level, and held us back from actually evolving to our greatest potential, which is really what the Earth was created to do. The Earth was a biosphere that was actually, terraformed, and it was a place where people could experience creation, evolution on this 3D level that would evolve to its highest potential, and it got hijacked by these regenerate beings.
When you get to some of the lower dimensions, what would it be like to be in the second or first dimension?
A lot of those first and second dimensions are more like mineral and plant kingdom. They're I don't know if you want to go there. It'd be like a major step in devolution. But when you're talking about the lower fourth dimension on those levels, it's pretty messed up down there. You have some very twisted souls on the lower levels of the fourth dimension.
Now, is it just like here, basically, but worse, where you're born, you live a life, then you die, and you do it again?
Well, they go there, and they're an expression of they actually look like their expression, you might say. And so, in a way, it's like, the best way I can explain it is that there is no judgment. We judge ourselves, and the guilt and the shame and whatever else that we carry within us create that reality. And we know in our hearts and hearts when we've screwed up and when we've acted in a very selfish, destructive way. And so that the people on the lower levels are pretty ugly, because that's how they're expressing, and their outward body kind of looks like that expression, And so when you have somebody that's really greedy and very self-serving and very on the fourth dimension, they turn out pretty ugly. They're very ugly beings, So there's nothing hidden there on that level. So so their consciousness magnetizes them to that level. So the ability, let's say the collective attitudes, emotions, and beliefs in the world in which we live, as well as our karma, our actions in the past, all that stuff creates a frequency or a vibration, and that vibration actually will magnetize you to a level that fits your frequency or your vibration, you might say. So that's just a universal law. So if you have somebody really messed up and screwed up, they're going to end up with a bunch of other messed up and screwed up people until they're done with that.
Well, and that brings me to the next question. If you're a bad person in this life, to the point to where you wake up in the next, in the fourth dimension, and you look like a goat that is overweight and dilapidated because of your actions in the previous life, how long are you stuck like that?
Until you ask for help, until you decide you don't want to do that anymore.
Wow. Okay, so it could literally be something just instantly then. You could just...
Yeah, but the problem is that you have to do it on a sincere soul level. It can't just be a mind, I don't think I'll do this anymore because this is looking pretty ugly. It doesn't. You have to go, okay, I've really screwed up here. I've made some really lame decisions, and I'm ready to try something different. And when you're really sincere and it's on a deep soul level, then a being will appear to you and help you out and get you out of that situation.
Now, and you also talked about the Council of 12. So, who is the Council of 12?
Well, the Council of 12 with that group, with the Anunnaki group, are some extremely advanced beings, and it's evolved over time, and now there's some like 8th dimensional beings sitting on that council, and some overseers that are extremely advanced, and it's a whole different group now. But the ones that they left behind here are actually being pulled before that council and saying, hey, we have a long list of things that you've done outside of universal law here, and you've really wreaked havoc down here, and they're having to face up to that. And so we're in that process of where the fallen Anunnaki are being dealt with, the Reptilian, the Grey, the regenerative ETs are being dealt with. All that stuff is in the process of being dealt with right now. We're right in the middle of this process, and we're actually moving towards the end of it. A lot of them have been removed already, and that's why this whole Illuminati program is being exposed and falling apart, and their kingdoms are crumbling because they're not frequency specific to where the Earth is evolving to.
It's a very interesting way to look at it. Also, a lot of people speculate that the people that control things right now, for the most part, the Illuminati or the Dark Lords, whatever you want to call them, tell people what they're going to do before they do it. Whether it's in a movie like Knowing or some Simpsons cartoon, whatever, and if the public accepts it and doesn't stop it, even though it's in a movie or supposedly fiction, that makes them not karmically bound to what they're going to do. Now, is that true with your research that you have done and the contact that you've made? Have there been any entities that have told you that or discussed that with you?
Well, it's true according to their beliefs, but it's not true according to universal law, because they think they're outside of universal law, that they're beyond it. They think they're gods, rulers over humanity. And to really understand the nature of God, you don't rule over humanity. You serve creation. You're one with creation. And so when you're fully enlightened, you see the Creator in all creation, and you don't do any harm. You don't take advantage of anybody. You don't, you serve people. It's like the sun. It just shines on everybody, and it continues to warm and send us life-giving rays. And that's more the nature of God. It doesn't try to dominate or control or manipulate or anything else. It's, love is the ultimate force in the universe, and love is the cosmic glue. It's the manifesting force behind creation. And you can't really harm another and do that out of love. It just doesn't work. You can't control, dominate, chip, poison, pollute, all those things. You just don't do that when you're enlightened and when you're awake. And so there's a thing called spiritual ego, and there's a thing called, a false religion or a false spirituality. Even a lot of the New Age community has actually fallen into that. They don't realize that they've been programmed and manipulated as well by psyops programs that came out of the CIA. But there's a lot of information in there that we need to back up and rethink and check out, because they program people that evil doesn't exist, it's all an illusion. Well, it does exist, and you better pay attention to it. And they also say if you see something negative, it's in you. So turn the other eye, don't look at it. Well, if you see something negative, it might be negative, and you might need to keep an eye on it or do something about it. And so a lot of the information that they put out is to disempower people and not pay attention or take action on things that really need to be dealt with. And so we have to keep an eye on that kind of belief system that, I had one guy tell me, well, it's all an illusion, so it doesn't matter. I can totally deforest this area and it doesn't matter. And I said, well, it does matter, because what you do on this level is going to weigh heavier light on your soul on the next level. And when you war against nature or creation and unconsciously, or through greed destroy it, you're going to have to deal with that. There's a reaction to that.
And you brought up a point earlier about how a lot of people are taking part in certain rituals and don't even realize it. So, for example, the banking cartels that have created currency, this fiat currency, around the U.S. that controls the majority of the world, does that mean that somebody that's partaking in purchasing goods with money, does that make them a part of the problem as well? So they're going to be karmically bound to that?
Well, a lot of it's around consciousness. If you're consciously aware of that, right now money is the accepted exchange of the earth, and you need it in order to function. And it's just an energy, and it can be directed in a lot of different ways. One of the main problems with money is that we're enslaved through it, and whoever controls the money controls humanity. And the people that control the money are creating manufactured lack and debt and all these other things, which are totally unnecessary. It doesn't have to be part of the problem. And, if we got away from the Federal Reserve and created our own treasury notes, which Kennedy and Lincoln and all the other people tried to do and got shot for it, we'd get away from that other system, and everything would go back into abundance.
Well, it is interesting how some of these leaders get taken out and wars get started when they want to get rid of the petrodollar or use a gold-backed currency. Yeah, it's very interesting. So that's obviously clearly another episode, but, you get contact with these entities. You see Pleiadians and Syrians on your ranch and these ships So are they all pretty much good that come around you, or do you guys see do you see ships that you think, oh man, that's a reptilian ship, that's full of the Harkonnen, that's the Cylons, they're coming by to show their presence, or is it pretty much all good where you're at?
Well, it's kind of guarded. This is a Stargate, and we have to stay on top of things to keep the energy clear here, but there's some major protection going on. And we have seen these other ships come in and actually get smoked, So it's kind of like one came in, it was a pretty large reptilian ship came in, and there was a large blue flash, and then it just turned into powder and just vaporized. And I asked them what that was about, and they said, well, these beings are very aggressive, and they came to do harm, they came to do deadly harm, so they were dealt with according to their intent. And they have a technology where if they hit something with this beam, it destabilizes the molecular bond, so everything goes back to atomic, like just dust, basically.
Back to the electron level, basically.
Yeah, you'll just see a little dust trail up there, and that's it. I mean, you don't see parts falling down or anything else because it totally dematerializes everything. It breaks the bond.
Huh. And I have researched into some of the work that Gene Roddenberry's done. Obviously, he's very famous for his sci-fi work and Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
There's some work that I read that he was a part of the Thule Society and supposedly did a lot of, I guess you could say, summonings with interdimensional beings or whatever, and that's where he got ideas for his work, whether that's, mumbo jumbo, I don't know. The Borg cube that's talked about, have you ever seen anything like that?
No, I haven't, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There's a lot of stuff that I've been kind of protected from or has been kept away from me, but they've allowed me to see some things. I mean, I've had one-on-one experiences with regenerate greys and some reptilians and things like that, and I've had to deal with those and learn how to. But the
could you share those with us?
Well, one particular one was I was up doing a vision quest up in the mountains, and it was on the, let me see which side that would be. That would be the east side of Mount Adams, and I was up there with another friend of mine that was there, and we were sleeping in our tents. His tent was a little further away from mine, and so we were crashed out, and all of a sudden I just felt the most nauseating energy you could imagine, like impending death. It was just so sickening, I couldn't believe it. And my whole body was I woke up and I just went, not mine. This is not mine. And I stood up and I looked outside my tent and there was a gray standing there, a taller gray. And I was, I was pissed. I wanted a piece of this thing. After it did that to me, I got up and I was coming out of the tent and it really triggered something in me that I was going to take it out, and it vanished in front of me. And I realized that most people couldn't break that. They couldn't break that thought process or that extended thought that they're using, to take me out, basically. And then I heard my friend screaming, and on the other side, and I ran over there to him, and whatever was messing with him left, and he broke him out of it, and the same thing happened to him. So that was one thing that I experienced that wasn't positive. When I was first starting out with my spiritual practices, I had a dark energy jump into me that I fought all night with. And I finally walked into the ocean at about 6 in the morning and to get rid of this thing. And I was pretty much done with it. But I was meditating and I was talking to the other masters, and I was pretty pissed off about it. And I said, I thought I had protection. What was that about? And I hear this voice, and it said, you did well. And I fucking, what do you mean I did well? And they said, well, that was part of your initiation. You need to realize these beings do exist, and they will jump in, and you have to, extend your, fortify your fields through meditation, through other practices, and they said that you'll never forget this experience. You'll know from here on out that there are these forces and that they do exist.
And let's say somebody wanted to do the type of work you do, James. They wanted to help the planet. They wanted to create harmony with the world, with its inhabitants, with the universe. What would they need to do to make contact, to learn what you have learned?
What's interesting is I notice a lot of the younger people kind of have that automatically with them. They already carry an incredible light, and they're focused, and they're very service oriented. And some people getting up in my age group and things like that. It's very hard, especially if you're just trying to make a name for yourself and you're seeking out, material wealth and fame and things like that. You're seeking that through external programs that we've been totally programmed to do. That's part of the Archon network. Everything's external. Your love, your acceptance, your joy, everything is through external means. You have to have the big car, the job, the fancy house. You got to get the blonde and the bikini if you drink the right beer and drive the right car. All that stuff. That we've been so programmed to be a success is through material acquisition, and it's really not. You've got to break that program, and you've got to totally break this matrix to get out of that. And very few people can do that, or can actually break out of that matrix to where they can see things from another level. It's almost like taking the red pill, but a lot of people actually take the red pill and they get absorbed back into the system again because it's based on survival. They need the money to make the payment to cover the needs of their family and things like that, and so they go back and get absorbed again by the system. But it's very hard to stay sovereign in your consciousness, to do your spiritual practices, and to dedicate yourself, body, mind, and spirit, like 24/7 to enlightenment and to holding a frequency and keeping your energies clear. And very few people, can do that. And the ones that do are usually up in the Himalayas or somewhere, on some mountaintop. But it's pretty interesting. It's not an easy trek, especially to walk in this society and hold that kind of frequency.
And it would be very difficult working a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, it's not that. You have to be pretty dedicated. And with me, my whole focus is in service and serving humanity and the earth. And so that focus actually I've learned ways that I can benefit from that, but I still keep everything simple and affordable and keep a simple life. And I stay detached. I'm not attached to it. Things come and go, people come and go, whatever. But mastering, you almost have to master loving amusement and loving detachment, you might say. And once you get those down, the rest of it's pretty easy.
There's a program that you do on your ranch, something about an ambassador program.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell our listeners exactly what that is?
Well, for years, we've been teaching self-mastery programs and then the self-mastery 2 and then the ambassador program as well. And they all kind of tie in together, but the self-mastery one covers all the different planes and dimensions, like who's who and how to heal unseen negative influences, how to keep your energy clear, and ways of self-healing, and a lot of technologies like that, and where people connect with the higher dimensional beings and the higher aspects of themselves as well. And then the ambassador training is more focused on the spiritually and technologically advanced ETs, but we do cover the lower levels too, so people aren't fooled that they may think they're talking to some spiritual and technologically advanced beings, but they might be having a contact with a regenerate ET or some astral being. And that happens a lot if you're not trained. There's a lot of people in air are working with beings that are not who they say they are. They're not of the highest caliber, and by their words and their deeds, they'll be known. Just observe them for a while and watch how they treat others and how they live their lives, and it'll be very clear as to what's going on. And one thing I wanted to tell people, is like, people are up on the podium and they're worshiping outside of themselves, and they're worshiping these people, and they need to stop doing that and start looking at how they act off the podium and what they're doing behind the podium and things like that. And that's very true in every level, all of our leadership, everything. We need to start backing up and taking a good hard look at who these people are and what they're really doing.
And in the programs that you put together, do you teach people how to actually control their mind and clear their mind?
Exactly. I mean, there's certain spiritual aspects that kick on. One's direct knowing, where you just know things. And you don't know why, and you just look at somebody, you'll know everything about them. And you'll know what their agenda is, and it's very simple. And telepathy, clairvoyancy, you see things, or clairaudiency, you'll hear things. All those things, we teach. And some people, everybody's different. Some people are clairvoyant, some people are clairaudient. Some people are like batteries. They hold a lot of energy. And some people are like antennas. They feel everything around them. And we kind of tell everybody, just accept your gift. This is your gift. This is what you've incarnated to do, and don't try to be something else. You can develop some of these other abilities if you want, but use what you have, and recognize the gifts you have now.
I also read something that you do energetic healing.
Yes.
So what does that mean exactly?
Basically, I don't do anything. I mainly get out of the way, let whatever needs to happen. But we do process-oriented therapies that are pretty profound. But we'll take people through. First, we'll heal any unseen negative influences that are hanging around that might be attached to them or interfering with their fields. And then we go through past lives and we clear any of those that are unfinished. And then we go into the ones that they need to know about that are going to be helpful, on their earth journey here. And then we end up by going through, like, from age 1 and clear any wounds or traumas or patterns, like any childhood traumas. And at the end, there's an initiation where they're actually initiated into contact with their main teacher and guide. And, sometimes, it could be Jesus, it could be Buddha, it could be a Pleiadian, it could be an Andromedan, it could be a lot of things, because we have these family connections, star family connections. And, some people are in the House of Mary. They're very involved in the Mary tradition. And, there's two, people realize that, Jesus had his thing, but there was the feminine side. There was the House of Mary, too, where all the women got together. And actually, he hung out there more than others because there's a lot more love and compassion there, in that house. So we forget about the divine feminine. The Pleiadians is a very feminine energy, very loving, very nurturing energy. There's so many different energies to connect to out there, and everybody's unique and individual, and it just helps people reconnect with their divinity and their multidimensional selves.
One of our listeners asked if you actually still do seminars on your ranch because they said they had a tough time getting in.
Yeah, we've had to change things here because of the legal problems. I mean, I had to go to court 10 times just to keep the ranch open, and it was just...
Why is that?
Well, there's certain powers that would like to see this not happening here, and it was becoming too big, and too many people were awakening and becoming empowered, and they don't like to see that. They want to keep people stupid, dumbed down, and nice little zombie worker bees, So,
right.
And so there's certain elements that would like to do that. And it's funny because they had no reason to close us down, and they refused to cooperate on any level whatsoever. And, we really tried to work through them and work with them. And finally, we had to just pull away and just become totally sovereign and remove ourselves from their system. So that's basically where we're at now.
What do you mean by that?
It's a long story. You have to patent the land. You have to go through all these steps, to where they don't have jurisdiction anymore, which is what we did. It was a long process, but and in quite a few court battles. I mean, I actually got arrested on one of them, but
They arrested you?
Yeah, I kind of ticked the judge off a little bit by telling him, who he really is and that he needs to go according to the law. And so, it's a long story. This is the whole legal thing. If you want to check into that, check into, there's so many different groups out there that you can check into that are teaching these things. But, the courts are basically a corporation, and you're the beneficiary. And they're the trustee, and the beneficiary holds the highest position, as the people. And when you go on there, you instruct the courts, this is what I want to do here. And as long as there's been no harm, they had really no reason for pulling us in there, because they couldn't even, there's certain parameters you have to do before. I'm kind of brain farting on my legal side, but you have to have a cause of action, I think it is. I'm trying to think of the. But, they didn't even meet those requirements, because you need an injured party, and there was no injured party. And we didn't do anything wrong here. We've done nothing but help and heal and awaken people, and nobody's been harmed here. So cause of action, that's what it is. So they didn't even meet the prerequisites for even bringing me into court, But, it was just unbelievable. But they kept using all these weird, they'd make up stories and, say this, say that, and then we'd, they said, oh, your septic system isn't up to par. So we went and had everything inspected, and it was all working perfectly. And then we had to file that with the county to prove that, there's what they were saying was incorrect. And, they just would make stuff up and do everything they could to make life miserable. But, we finally overcame it and still continuing. But we had to go private. So now we're a private ranch, and through private invitation, people can come. But if you just show up and want to walk through the gates, it just doesn't work that way. So, but, if you just go to ECETI reservations@gmail.com and send us an email, we can set up a a time, that people can come. We just need to know, when you're coming. But we had to go private and get away from the public sector because that's where they had inroads, to come and create problems.
I don't know if you've seen the series 4400 that came out back from 2004 to 2006.
No.
Okay. Well, what you're talking about, James, I just wanted to bring up the similarity. The 4400 is basically about a group of people that got picked up for X amount of years. They came back at a certain time, and they had these amazing abilities. And one of them started up basically a center to help others reach their abilities, whether it be telekinesis, telepathy. And what you're talking about, there was organizations that tried to shut them down because of the way that they were opening up people's minds.
Well, when you're awakened, you're very hard to control and manipulate, and that's the last thing they want is an empowered, educated public.
We don't have a whole lot of time here left. We've got probably about 15 minutes, and I was hoping you could share with us, basically the latest messages that you've received and some enlightenment to our audience that we could use to continue to help improve the world and our surroundings.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. What's going on right now is that these higher dimensional beings are saying the same thing that every master teacher has told us, and we just haven't taken heed. Some of us have, but they're basically telling us to start being kind to each other and be kind to the planet, in a nutshell, and start living under universal law. And as I said before, that's living under universal peace and brother sister love and the individual freedom and prosperity for everybody. There's an old Native American saying, I'm part Cherokee myself, and Scotch-Irish are kind of a mix. But they have an old saying that, if it isn't good for everyone, it isn't good. And that, in a nutshell, just if you could just go by that one saying, it would change everything. And think about the next generations. What kind of an environment are we leaving for the next generations? And all of these wars are all about money. They have nothing to do with God or creation or anything else. There's an old saying that every war was because one king or leader wanted what another leader or king had, and it's all about resources or women or it's all about metals or whatever, or it has oil, whatever. It never has anything to do with God, because there are no holy wars, because creation doesn't war on itself. It just doesn't happen. But, all these other things are just pure greed, and they're influenced by these other beings, these other programs. So, we need to really take a long, hard look at the war industry, at the oil industry, at the pharmaceutical industry, all these industries, and see if they really serve humanity. You ask ourselves, why don't we have the cure for diseases? Why don't we have fuelless energy technology? Why don't we have peace? And you really look at that, there is no money in any of that. And so that's the problem. We have the war on disease profiteers out there, and we have other factions out there that are capitalizing at humanity and nature's expense. And so we need to take a long, hard look at that and actually get out of denial and look at where our leadership has taken us and start looking towards a different way of choosing our leaders. Any advanced civilization, they choose their leaders according to their spiritual adeptness and their record of service, to their civilization. And we do the opposite. We choose our leadership, because of their power and wealth, and we don't even care how they got there.
Sorry to interrupt, James, but do we choose?
Well, that was my next line I was going to go into, and then that's the illusion that we even have a choice, because all that's pretty much installed.
Right. This has been a fascinating couple of hours. I really appreciate you coming out here with us. One thing I'd like to ask, James, is I don't know if you've ever done an experiment online or on broadcast before as far as making contact with any of these entities, whether it be the Pleiadians or the Andromedans or the Sirians. It would be amazing if you could possibly do something like that with our audience right now.
I did that on Coast to Coast, and it was the last time they let me on the air. But and it was with Art Bell, and it was an amazing success because it was happening globally, and they just got locked down, basically, all their phones and computers and everything. They had so many people calling and emailing in that actually had success and saw the ships and had the experience. And so what's funny, that was the last time I went on Coast to Coast, so because it was such a success. And there's other things going on there too, why haven't been on. But it's I think that is important. If people just get into a quiet space, and first of all, I would do a little prayer, and I'd call on the beautiful many, whoever you believe in. It could be Buddha, Jesus, a lot of different beings, Mary, Kuan Yin. It doesn't matter. But, call on Jesus if you want. But, basically ask that any unseen negative influences, any controlling or manipulating entities be removed, be gone, and create a sacred space, for yourself. And then just fill your heart with love and joy and bliss. And if you go to a place where you're really happy, and just think about that time when you're extremely happy, when you had no worries and no problems, and send that love and joy out to them, and just say, I want to contact. And there's the old saying, the mind in which you seek is the mind in which you connect. So if you're sending out loving, joyous, blissful thoughts, that's the type of beings that you're going to draw to you. If you're filled with fear and religious dogma and things like that, then that might be your experience as well. So you want to let go of that. And if you are filled with that, just don't do the experiment. I would suggest don't even involve yourself in it. But the main thing is they are extremely telepathic. When you send out love and joy and bliss, that's the frequencies they operate under. And if you do that as a daily practice, with the intent of having contact, you're going to draw to you that type of being. So if people want to do an experiment tonight, they can actually do that same thing, is just sit down and meditate and ask that any unseen negative influences be cleared, and that, you're only opening up to the highest consciousness and energy, and you want your aura closed to all but your own higher selves, your own higher dimensional selves, and any master teachers that serve the light. You can kind of make this up as you go. It doesn't have to be perfect. But be sure and invoke protection first, and clear your fields, and then send that love and joy and bliss out, and just tell them you want to know. You want to understand what's going on, and tell them you want contact, and you want to meet your star family. And it's best to do that, too, right before you go to bed. You could do it now or do it again before you go to bed, and then watch what happens. Be aware of your dreams, write them down. A lot of these contacts seem like a dream because they're higher dimensional experiences. So that's the best way to do it. So I'd love to invite, whoever wants to participate in this to actually connect with these beings. Connect with the Pleiadians or the Arcturians, Andromedans, the Orion Council of Light. There's a lot of different groups out there that are here to assist us.
Excellent. I really appreciate it, James.
Oh, thanks for having me on. You can go to ECETI.org, and if you want to find out about the ongoing events here or anything, other information about coming to the ranch, just send an email to ECETI Reservations, and they'll get back to you.
A very special thank you to our guest tonight. For all of you that had the opportunity to be here with us, if you enjoyed the show, follow us on YouTube, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord, for the most recent interviews, videos, and podcasts. Or you can check us out on the World Wide Web, www.leakproject.com. Would you like to be a guest on our show? If you have information that the world needs to see and hear, send us an email, guestbookings@leakproject.com. Thank you, everybody. This is Rex Bear with Leak Project. Stay safe and be the change you want to see. Good night. Inside the Borg and free from the hive mind, this is Rex Bear hosting Leak Project. The Leak Project was created to offer awareness and information not found in the mainstream news. With over 90% of the world's media controlled by only 6 enormous conglomerates, many people today are looking for more accurate information. The Leak Project offers a refreshing approach to the brain drain media. Check back daily for new content as we thrive to bring you the cutting edge in news, current events, on-scene video footage, interviews, and most importantly, the truth. All right, tonight we have very special guest, James Gilliland. He is a minister, counselor, internationally known lecturer, best-selling author with the books Reunion, The Source, and Becoming Gods, as well as The Ultimate Soul Journey. James has appeared in Contact Has Begun, His Story, The History Channel, UFOs Then and Now, UFO Hotspots, ABC Fox News, BBC, Danny Dyer Special, Paranormal State, ECETI Ranch, a documentary, and the new movie Thrive have all featured James and ECETI, which he is the founder of. He has appeared on Coast to Coast, Jeff Rentz, and other numerous radio shows. Also, being the host of As You Wish Talk Radio, which is www.bbsradio.com, and Contact Has Begun, www.worldpuga.net. James is a facilitator of many Eastern disciplines, a visionary dedicated to the awakening and healing of humanity and the Earth, and he teaches higher dimensional realities from experience. James, glad you could make it out tonight. Where are you guys located?
Well, basically, we're located at the base of Mount Adams in Trout Lake, Washington, and it's an extremely well-known, it's an internationally known UFO hotspot, and it has a long, long history of UFO activity going back to the Native Americans and, you know, the fire tower, the forest rangers. It's just been ongoing for so long, and we've had, I think, even Dr. John Hynek did research up here. David Long, I think Greg Long, David Akers, all those guys have written books about this place. So it just has a long, long history of UFO activity here.
So you've obviously made contact for quite some time. How long has there been a connection? How long have they actually made contact with you?
Well, I've had contact ever since I was a kid, and I didn't really understand the process. But you know, as I got older and did more research into it, I gained a lot more, you know, awareness on this level of what was going on. So I would say, you know, it's been going on for quite a long time. And I was actually raised in Apple Valley, California, which isn't too far away from the Integratron and all the contacts that were going on in that area as well. So it's been a part of my life ever since I was a little kid. We used to sleep out in the desert and throw out sleeping bags and, you know, watch UFOs. It was just a common thing.
So the UFOs that you've been seeing, have they actually been close enough to where you could see them from the, you know, with the naked eye without having a pair of binoculars or a telescope?
Oh yeah, they've come in really close. You know, we had Paranormal State out here, and you know, Danny Dyer, all these people doing UFO specials, and the ships came right when and where we said they would. They appeared and they flew treetop level, and then made a nice turn around the mountain. So it's been really well documented. And you know, from my own personal experience, I've had face-to-face contact with them. I've been on the ships.
Wow. So you've been on the ships. Well, the first time you were on a ship, James, what did it look like?
Well, the first time I went on a ship, it was a Pleiadian ship, and there wasn't much to it. They're very clean. They're very simple. It had 3 chairs in it, for 3 people to fly in the one. It was a smaller one. And it had screens all the way around it, so you could see anywhere, you know, at any time, even their home world. If they wanted to, they could tune into that. But pretty amazing ship. But there's just, you know, there wasn't a lot of bells and whistles on it that you could see, because most of it was operated through the consciousness of the person. I mean, there's a few dials and things to flip if they wanted to, but most of it was almost like done with psychic switches, you might say, or something of that nature.
What kind of clothes were they wearing?
Well, they wore a kind of a spandex jumpsuit, very tight-fitting outfit. When I went on the ship, they actually had me put one on. And what's really interesting is the clothing. When you put it on, it actually felt better having the clothing on than not. It had an energetic component to it.
Was the clothing something that made it more accessible to communicate to the controls telepathically, or was it something that you felt they just had natural abilities to do?
I think it's natural, but the clothing also seemed to have kind of a life force to it.
You know, there's a lot of stuff now in the theaters about transhumanism, merging man with machine. The ship that you were on, that you're talking about, is it something like that?
Well, I think they're autonomous. The beings are autonomous, but at the same time they're connected. So they maintain their uniqueness, but at the same time they have a connected program going on. I think one of the problems with the transhuman agenda here is the people behind it, and it's not really for the betterment of humanity. It's for the control of humanity.
Right. It's technology can be used for you or against you, and it does appear that a lot of people now in power would definitely use something like that to their advantage and not the common folk.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting that you had that opportunity. The Pleiadians, do they look just like us?
Well, they seem to be more genetically refined. A lot of them live like 1,200 years, 900 years, and some even live longer than that. But they're more genetically refined, very beautiful, and they emanated an energy. When you're around them, you just felt this total blissful, loving presence.
Why is it that people portray the extraterrestrial race, or most of them, as a very evil species that wants to destroy humankind, not help them?
Well, mainly that's been an agenda for quite some time, because in order to keep the billions of dollars going into the war industry and the black projects, we have to have a threat. And so they really push that agenda, to keep people in fear and to keep people saying, oh, you guys take care of this for us. We'll just keep throwing dollars your way. And but there are some ETs, a very small minority group that are regenerate. They aren't really in our highest and best good, but most of the universe is benevolent. But we need to rise to the occasion if we're going to be working with them.
Okay, so back to the experiences that you've had. This Pleiadian ship you were on the first time. These Pleiadians, what did they tell you to do? What was your purpose there?
The first time I went with them, it was more of an indoctrination round. They just wanted me to know that they were real, to see the ship, and to be on the ship. And they flew it next to a fire tower. And there's some people up here. They let you rent the fire towers for a certain amount of time, and because they're not really using them anymore, a lot of them. And so there's an older man, and was a grandfather, grandmother, and their nephew or whatever were there. And so they flew this ship around the fire tower and just sat there and parked it. And I could see the occupants, and they're getting all excited and freaking out a little bit. And they sent them some energy to calm them down. And one of the kids took a crayon and he was drawing the ship, the kid was. And then we left. And so a lot of this, your mind has trouble relating to this because it just doesn't seem real. Your mind's always trying to discount what happened. And so later on that week, it was a little while later, they went on, I'm trying to think of this. I think it's Joe Gorgiola or whatever, this show he has on. It's like Town Hall or something. But this couple actually went on Town Hall and talked about their experience, and it was the exact same experience that I saw, but I was on the ship when it happened.
How many people were on the ship?
There was just one other person on when I was on it. There was a female.
And did she tell you her age?
No, she didn't. It's hard to tell. There's one Pleiadian that we work with that's about 2 million years ahead of us in time as we know it, coming back in time, and she's about 430 years old, and she was the only one that's told me her age, and she looks about 25. I mean, she's just beautiful. But you can imagine if these beings live thousands of years, 430 years old would probably be not even adolescence for them.
Sure. And did you see any weapons?
No, I didn't, but I think they have the capability to defend themselves on those ships, but it's hidden. There's not like a big bazooka sitting there on the table. It's probably built into the ship somehow.
Were you frightened?
Not at all.
I mean, somebody going in a ship like that, it's especially at a young age, it's got to be quite fascinating. Was it just an overwhelming feeling of security, as if nothing was going to happen to you, basically?
Oh yeah, when you're in their presence, you feel totally protected and loved. You just, it's kind of an interesting experience. I can't even explain it, but they're very familiar. They activated some things within me that brought back a lot of my past life awareness of being on the ships in the past and things of that nature. So it was very second nature for me. It wasn't a problem at all.
So what is your purpose, James?
Well, good question. You know, it's there's many levels to it. I wear many hats. I have kind of a science hat where I've been working with healing technologies and working a lot with water and this crystallized oxygen water and some other water technologies that are having amazing healing properties. But and there's other things I'm working with, but mainly I'm focused on the awakening and healing of humanity and the earth, and there's many hats to that. And a lot of it's more like an ambassador, a lot of it's educational, and you know, kind of letting people know that these are ancient ancestors that are returning, and they're not really shouldn't be seen as some ET or something other than the greater family of man. They're part of our extended family.
Well, and you said you're working with somebody that's approximately 430 years old, and she's coming from the future 2 million years ahead of us. How are you making contact with her?
Well, with her, it's telepathic, mainly telepathic. I've seen her in my mind's eye. When she's talking to me, I'll close my eye and I can see her clairvoyantly. And then mainly that type of contact. There's different types of contact and different types of you might say connections on the ships and things, because some are more physical, some are taking you out of body in your etheric body, and it's just as physical on that level as it is on this level. You know, they have some pretty extreme technology. So if you're going to go and hang out with a fifth dimensional being or a sixth or a seventh dimensional being, you have to have a body that resonates on that level. So we're multidimensional beings, and they can work with us through that multidimensional aspect of ourselves, you know, so they can have these contacts.
You know, and there's so many reasons to believe that there are the possibilities of higher dimensional beings, even if you haven't made contact with them like yourself, just because of all the looks like pretty good evidence out there, you know. But let me ask you this. Why are humans in the middle of everything? It just seems as if we're pretty important, but are we?
Well, we have the seeds of the gods, basically. We have the genetics here that are just, a lot of them would like to have those genetics. It's amazing. But we're a big genetic soup down here. We're an experiment with 12 different star nations that were involved. I think others came later in terraforming the earth and bringing a lot of their genetics and their animal and plant life and things like that to the earth. So we're just this massive galactic zoo down here, and they're all kind of checking it out and watching over us.
An intergalactic ant farm.
Yeah, and we you know, we have no idea how valuable this planet is, and the genetic life here, and you know, the resources and everything else here are just amazing, and we just trash them every day, including our own genetics. You know, we're always trashing our own genetics and tinkering with them and poisoning ourselves, and you know, it's not just us doing it. There's other elements that are involved doing that as well. So that's another story. You know, when you get into the chemtrails and the vaccinations and all the other things going on, and the GMO foods and on and on and on.
Well, and that's something that I would like to address here in front of our listeners. And from a skeptical standpoint here, I'm going to play devil's advocate. With these Pleiadians having this technology and the ability to send energy beams down to people to calm them down and pick you up and move from time and space, etc., if we're so valuable and they care about us as much as you say they do, then why is it nuclear facilities are allowed to be put on fault lines and, you know, Fukushima disasters? Why is it that they can put mercury in vaccines and force feed them into children and put chemicals into the skies and the water and the food supply? Is it another species? Is it human that's doing that? I mean, because it really does seem as if there's a nefarious ploy to cull the herd.
Yes, there is. There always has been. If you know the